right, everybody stand up.
And that camera's off.
I'll sit by my friend.
It was pretty rough growing up. My mom was addicted to meth when I was a kid. My mom ended up getting cancer, and she passed away in 2010. And I lived with my stepdad for the time being. It was one day I was at school, and my teacher had asked me what was going on with me, and I just started crying, and I'm telling him, my dad's abusing me, my mom just passed away. He looks at me in my eyes and he's like, Jaden, I'm so sorry this is happening to you, but I'm gonna have to call CPS. I was in contact with one of my mom's family friends. After everything is all said and done, they get me to move to where she's at. And there was this one day I came home from school, and I was a little bit late, and she just got really angry, and it was so quickly. She's like, I don't want you here anymore, I'm gonna call your CPS worker. I'm like, okay. And I walked out the door, and that was that. I went to my school, and I slept outside of my school for a few days. This girl came up to me and approached me and said, if you need somewhere to stay, you can come stay with me and my boyfriend. So I was like, where else am I gonna go? I don't have anywhere else to go. And there was about 4 or 5 other girls living in the house with us. And she had told me, she's like, this is my boyfriend Joker, and he's gonna take good care of you. Joker was very nice to me. He would take me out and we'd go to the movies, and he'd buy me clothes, and he'd get my nails done. And it was one day, Joker came up to me and asked me, I'm sitting on the couch. He's like, we're gonna go out for a little bit. Do you wanna come out with us? I was like, sure. We pull up to this motel. It's me and this other girl. We go into this motel. She meets up with this man, and she's talking to this guy, and they're exchanging some words, and they're talking about sexual things. And I'm starting to catch on, and things are starting to click in my head. And I'm like, that's why you were so nice to me. And I'm watching her as she takes her clothes off, and she lays down for this guy, and he has sex with her. And I'm looking at Joker, and he's sitting there with this blank face, as if it's something normal. After everything's finished, and he pays her, Joker sits down and tells me, I'm not asking you to do what they do, but I'm asking you to sit in on every appointment that we go on. I don't want you living here just for free. And he's like, this will be your way of paying me back. And I did. For the next 2 months, I sat in on every appointment that every girl had. The first couple of times was really hard for me. But after a while, this is the thing that we did. When you don't have anywhere else to go, you do what you have to do. We were going to this appointment, and Joker took me and one of my closest friends at the time. We got into the room, and the dude's sitting on the bed, and he's looking at me the entire time. And I'm like, what are you looking at? And he's like, I want her. And I'm like, I'm not doing this. And he's really angry, and he's like, so you're telling me you're not gonna give me what I want? He goes in his pocket, and he pulls out a gun. I'm sitting there crying on the floor. He tells me that I'm gonna do this thing to him, and I'm like, I guess I am. I'm about to. It probably was maybe 3 minutes later when Joker comes in and he tells us to get out. Joker comes back out into the car, and he looks at me and he says, I hope you really didn't expect to live here and not do anything for us. I'm still crying because this man was holding a gun in my head not too long ago. And in my head, I'm going through all these different scenarios of how my life could play out. I'm playing back all these girls of what they said, you're not gonna be able to do this sober. So I'm gonna be a drug addict just like my mother. I love my mom, I really did. And I saw her struggles, and I saw the way that men treated my mom, and I told myself that was me. But I didn't have anywhere else to go. We get home, and Joker goes back to his room, and we're all sitting out, and we're just talking about everything that had just happened. And we haven't heard from him in a while. He was quiet, and he didn't come out. And so we go in there to check on him, and he's basically, I'm pretty sure he overdosed, because he's foaming at the mouth. I'm thinking it's fight or flight. So I left, and I slept on the streets again for a couple days. And it was hard for me because I was constantly looking for somewhere to stay. I had a mentor of mine, and she had asked me a couple times, she's like, why don't you come to church with me? So I go to this church, and I meet this family. We probably met up like twice, in all honesty. It was only like a couple times that we saw each other. And they had told me that they were interested in adopting me, and it was a lot of disbelief because of all the things that I had went through. And they were like, this isn't a temporary thing. We're not asking you to be here, for just a short period amount of time, but we want you to be here with us. We love you. We want to take you in our family. And I was like, heck yeah. So I've been with them ever since.
So I encourage you to check out the exodusroad.com. I'm going to give you some more things to check out at the end of this study tonight. But tonight we're talking about human trafficking. Because if we're saying that life matters, and we say that life matters all the way from the womb to the tomb, then that means that everything that happens in between the womb and the tomb matters. And human trafficking is one of the biggest issues of today. And we're going to talk about some statistics in a minute. But as we go through this study, I want you to think about what your role to play in all of this is. And I want to remind you about this right here. Remember, we are taking up money for Save the Storks. And we're going to make a big donation to them, hopefully, at the end of our Life Matters study. Do what? We'll try. They're not that expensive. They're just a little over $100,000. We ought to be able to. We can come up with that, right? Some of y'all got that in your piggy bank at home. But look, here's the deal. Even if we don't come up with enough to purchase a bus, every dollar you spend is a little bit more to help women realize that they have other options other than aborting their children. Okay. So I don't care how small it is that we give, we can give something, and whatever we give, that could be one life saved. You get what I'm saying? So do keep bringing your contributions to that, or your offerings to it, and putting it in the Save the Storks bucket there. All right, let's talk about human trafficking. What is human trafficking? Well, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security says that human trafficking is modern-day slavery and involves the use of force, fraud, or coercion to obtain some type of labor or commercial sex act. So human trafficking, people are trafficked for labor, which is what our historical definition of slavery, what we think about when we think about slavery. That's what that is, and then but nowadays too, people are used for sex, and so people are forced into that kind of a lifestyle too. Focus on the Family has a little bit different thing to say at its core. It's talking about sex trafficking. Sex trafficking is an issue of the sanctity of human life. Remember, we talked about sanctity of human life the very first night of Life Matters. Trafficking degrades and often destroys human lives that are made in the image of God. We spent 2 whole weeks talking about the importance of the image of God and what that means for us as human beings. Let me share some statistics with you. 40.3 million victims of trafficking exist globally. That's a pretty large number, isn't it? 40.3 million. Okay? 81% are in forced labor. 25% are children. So 1/4 of these 40.3 million. Somebody do some quick math. That ought to be real easy. 10 million. 25% of 40 million. So So
Oh, I
about,
didn't know what you were talking
yeah.
about. I thought you were talking about the 80 million.
now, about 10 million, listen, about 10 million of these are children. 75% are women or girls. So 30 million are women or girls, okay? Human trafficking produces $150 billion each year worldwide. So it is a very lucrative thing for the people who are in charge of it. How many of you have ever seen the movie Taken? Or Taken 2 or Taken 3?
Right.
Okay? Taken, the first one especially, that was a human trafficking ring that abducted his daughter, and what was the first thing that they did? They doped her up. Remember that? And so that's part of the whole process. 1 out of 6 endangered runaways are likely child sex trafficking victims. Okay? That means if you go down to Walmart and you look on they have a board down there of missing children. If these statistics are correct, potentially 1 out of every 6 of those on that board are victims of sex trafficking or human trafficking. It's estimated that the number of victims in the U.S. reaches into the hundreds of thousands. So it's a big business in the United States. It is a big deal, okay? Honestly, I'm just going to be honest with you. One of the things that scares me the most as a father is human trafficking. Hush. Is human trafficking. It's not a joke. It's serious stuff. 1 minute you're going about your day, and the next minute you're gone. And from what I've read about it in the past, that if girls or guys, whoever is being trafficked or kidnapped, if they're not located in the first 24 hours, the chances of ever finding them diminish with every day. They diminish like in huge numbers every day, just because of the complexity of the trafficking network. They're constantly moving people around, and it's all kind of like this underground type thing. I don't mean like underground in tunnels. I mean like they're very secretive and very it's on the DL. So it's a very serious thing. Okay. Now I want to show you this map, because this map is put out by the Polaris Project, and this map. What the Polaris Project does, listen, what the Polaris Project does is the Polaris Project is a human trafficking, they're like on the front lines, right? And so they have a hotline that you can call if you're the victim of human trafficking, or if you see some suspected behavior, and then they contact law enforcement officials, and the law enforcement officials go and check it out, okay? So what you're seeing on the map are confirmed human trafficking areas. And it's like a weather map. When you see something come across your radar map and it's green, green means it's just rain. Red means, yeah, get in the hall, right? I mean, it means it's fixing to get kind of serious. You don't hang out in the backyard on the trampoline when red is coming, right? You get off. Yeah, okay? All right, listen, stay with me here. Silliness aside, because this is not a silly subject. There's no joking in life. This is serious stuff, okay? This map then shows where the green or the blue areas are. That's where the least amount of activity is. But where the red areas are, that's where there is a great amount of confirmed human trafficking going on. And I want you to notice right here is the interstate that runs through from Meridian to Jackson. Jackson right here is full on red, right? Meridian is orange. Yes, that's bad. So what am I telling you? I'm telling you that Meridian, Mississippi is a hot spot for human trafficking. You don't hear about it. It's not talked about very much on the news. But here's one thing I can tell you. There have been a lot of young ladies who have come up missing in our area over the last 5 to 10 years. You get what I'm saying? That's why my daughter is not allowed out of my sight. I know that I sound like an overprotective parent, but all it takes is 1 minute for you to take your eyes off your kid, and somebody can grab them and they're gone. So I say that to you for a couple of reasons. Number one, I don't care if you're a guy or a girl, you need to be vigilant. Okay? Because there are predators among us. You don't know who they are. They look like normal people, but they have sinister plans. One of the best ways you can keep from being a victim is to have situational awareness and always be watching what's going on around you. Make sure nobody's ever sneaking up behind you. Try to avoid being, alone as much as possible and things like that. Are you following me on this? Okay. The other thing is, if you see something that's suspicious, that doesn't look right, it's probably not right. Okay? We don't have the privilege, based on what we're seeing here in our area, to say, oh, this kind of stuff doesn't happen around us. Because guess what? This proves these are confirmed cases. And for every confirmed case, there are tons of unconfirmed activity going on.
Like, take those confirmed cases.
Something like that. Okay? So this is serious, right where we live. This is not stuff that's happening in another part of the country, right? When we talked about abortion, we said abortion had how many Meridian had how many abortion clinics? Zero. Okay? There was one in Jackson, and that's the only one in the state of Mississippi. But I want you to look at the state of Mississippi. It's covered up by this. And look, in our town, it's happening. Okay? So don't assume that it's not happening here. Don't assume that it can't happen to you or to someone you know. Now, I'm not saying any of that to tell you be scared, be afraid to live your life. I'm not saying that. I'm saying be aware. You get what I'm saying? Okay? So here are some more facts about human trafficking. Human trafficking victims rarely come forward to seek help because of either language barriers, fear, or powerlessness. So a lot of people that are trafficked are like illegal immigrants who may come into the country, and then they are kidnapped and sold into sex trafficking and things like that. And a lot of those people, they're afraid to come forward because they're afraid that what would happen if they're found out. They'll be deported, okay? Or they can't even speak the language, so there's no way they can ask anybody for help, okay? Then there's fear. A trafficker may tell someone, if you try to escape, I know where your family is, and I'll kill your family, or I'll hurt your family, or something like that. And then there's powerlessness. Go back to that movie Taken that some of you have seen. The first thing they did was they injected her with drugs. And what a lot of traffickers do is they get their victims hooked on some kind of drug, and then the victim is powerless because, if you're passed out or you're high, you're not going to try to get away. But then the other problem is they get to a point where they are addicted, right? And then they have to have that drug, and their owner, their trafficker, is the only place that they can get it. You get what I'm saying? So they become dependent on their trafficker. Traffickers look for people who are susceptible. They go after the emotionally or psychologically vulnerable, poor, lonely, unprotected, or those who have experienced disasters. And many victims don't even realize they're victims because of the psychological torture that traffickers inflict. Jaden, on the video, talked about the process that she went through. Joker was the name of the trafficker, remember? he let her come in and live with him for a while, and she didn't know anything was going on, right? I mean, she just thought he was this nice guy. He would take them and buy them stuff, take them to the movies. Well, what Joker's doing is he's trying to get her to feel like she owes him something. You get what I'm saying? Any decent human being, when you do something for them, what do they feel like? They feel like they owe you for it. They feel like they are beholden to you until they can kind of repay you. So then what did he do? He took it to the next level, and he made her witness some things that were going on, and he forced her over the course of 3 months to be part of everything that went on. Why was he doing that? Well, it's because any decent human being does not want to be part of the things that these sex traffickers are forcing these girls to be a part of. And so what he's doing by forcing her to sit there and watch it happen with somebody else is he's breaking down her defenses. She became numb to it, exactly. It's kind of like the frog in the boiling water, right? You throw a frog in a pot of boiling water, he'll jump out. But if you put him in a pot of cold water and slowly increase the heat, he'll stay in there because his body is acclimated to the temperature of the water until he boils to death, okay? And that's what these sex traffickers do. They slowly break down defenses. It's a psychological thing. And then what was the next step? He forced her then to become one of the people that she had been watching, or he tried to. And I believe that if he had not overdosed on the drugs, she probably would not have gotten out. You see what I'm saying? That was a fortuitous thing for her that happened because it provided her an escape. Okay? That's how these traffickers work. They manipulate people psychologically so that sometimes, actually many times, the victims don't even realize that they're victims. There's a lot of psychological abuse and emotional abuse that goes on. Are y'all following me on this? That makes sense to you? Okay? Some of you may know some folks who are being mistreated in this way, and they don't even realize that they're victims. Okay? Let's look at a fact that some people overlook, and this comes from Focus on the Family. Focus on the Family says we must understand that human trafficking is directly fueled by and connected to the growth and acceptance of other forms of sexual exploitation, such as prostitution, pornography, and strip clubs. And so people think that those things are innocent. Like, we wouldn't look at them and go, those things are innocent, but people think that those things are innocent. They're just forms of entertainment. They're really not that bad, right? I mean, you may even be tempted to look at stuff like that on the internet or things like that, okay? But what Focus on the Family is saying here is that those aren't innocent. What those are is they are feeder systems for a trafficking business. You get what I'm saying? Because what do they do to us? They change the way we think. They break down our defenses. They numb us the same way that the traffickers try to numb their victims. So that we're not bothered by these things as much. Not only that, but they produce men and women who want to experience the things in real life that they see happening on a video. Okay? And because any decent human being is not going to want to participate in those kinds of behaviors, then they have to contact folks who can force someone to participate in that kind of behavior. Do you get what I'm saying? All right? So it's important that we understand that. Now, what have we established so far in our study that might talk to us a little bit about the human trafficking situation? One thing that we have talked about is that every person is made in the image of God with value and dignity. But what does human trafficking do? Yeah, trafficking devalues humans and strips them of their dignity. Your value becomes tied to the services that you can offer when you are a trafficking victim. You hear me on that? And so it's not unlikely that when you are no longer valuable to your trafficker, you are discarded. And that happens in a lot of different ways. You can imagine some of the worst. You get what I'm saying? Okay? It strips them of dignity. You and I understand what it is to have dignity, to have personhood, to be able to kind of choose for ourselves what is acceptable and what's not acceptable. But a victim of trafficking doesn't have that ability. They are a slave that's forced to do things regardless of how they feel about those things. That makes sense to you? Yeah? Go with me? I haven't lost any of you. We're all still on the same bus? Okay. God creates every person with God-given purpose and plan. We talked about that the second week. And trafficking robs people of purpose, at least God-given purpose. And it replaces your purpose for life with whatever your trafficker says your purpose for life is. You follow me on that? And it frustrates God's plans. If God has a plan for this person's life, and they're kidnapped and they're forced into immoral and evil behavior against their will, that frustrates God's plan in their life. Every human life is sacred from womb to tomb, and trafficking treats individuals as objects to be used. They're commodities to be traded. People are no longer people, they're objects. This is part of the reason that pornography is an issue, is because pornography trains our minds to see other human beings as objects. Men no longer see women as women with value and dignity and a mind. They see them as an object to be used. Women no longer see men as someone with value and dignity and a mind and a soul. They see men as an object to be used. And that is exactly what trafficking capitalizes on. It makes people objects to be used. God's image is displayed in us through our capacity to love. But what does trafficking do? Is love any part of the relationship? Not at all, right? What does it replace love with? Acts. Okay? On the one hand, lust, if you're the one doing the purchasing. What if you're the other person? What if you're the victim? What is it? Pain? Fear, hate, right? All of those. God created us for a relationship. He created us for love. And we said that we are most like God when we demonstrate love. That's part of what it means to be made in the image of God, that we were made to love and to be loved. And human trafficking totally removes that from the equation of relationships, so that relationships they work on the basis of lust, hatred, fear, anger, and all of those evil parts of our humanity. We said, we learned that Christ came that all who trust Him might have abundant life. John 10:10, I've come that you may have life, and you may have it what? Abundantly. Christ came to offer abundant life. But what does trafficking do? First of all, it limits access to knowledge of Christ. I'm promising you, now listen to this, traffickers aren't sitting in their trafficking houses gathering up all of their victims to have Bible studies. Right? So it limits access to even the knowledge of Christ, but even more than that, it limits access to the abundant life that Christ came so that we could have. So in all of these things that we've talked about so far in our study, each of these have been a point of a message, and trafficking distorts every one of them. So just on the basis of everything we've studied so far in this Life Matters study, we can see that trafficking is evil. Okay? It's of the devil. But I want to spend the rest of the time talking about another aspect of this. And I want to begin by asking, why did Jesus even come to the earth? Okay? I was reading in the Old Testament in Isaiah. Isaiah was a prophet to the nation of Judah. Okay? Judah was the Judah and Israel were once one nation under David and Solomon, but after Solomon, the nation split. And Judah was the northern territory, and Israel was the southern. Well, the southern, the other way around. Israel was northern and Judah was southern. Israel fell long before Judah did, okay? But Judah hung on as a nation for a while, but Judah was just as evil as the northern kingdom of Israel. And so Isaiah was the prophet that God sent to Judah to warn them of the calamity that was coming on them, the oppression. The Assyrians were going to come in, and a lot of them were going to be shipped off to Babylon and all of this kind of stuff. But even as part of this warning, this prophetic warning that calamity was coming and judgment was coming, God still gave them hope for the future, because Isaiah prophesied about the coming Messiah. And if you go read Isaiah chapter 53, Isaiah chapter 53 is almost a picture of who Jesus is, who the Messiah is going to be. So I encourage you, when you have a chance, read Isaiah 53, and as you're going through there, you're going to see that's one of the main prophetic passages we talk about. But in Isaiah chapter 61, Isaiah also prophesies about the coming Messiah. And here's what he said. This is the Messiah speaking, okay, of himself through this prophecy. The Spirit of the Lord God is on me, because the Lord has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives and freedom to prisoners, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. Now here's what's super interesting. In Luke chapter 4, Jesus is beginning his earthly ministry, okay? And he's back home in his hometown of Nazareth. And he's teaching in the synagogue. And so they bring the scroll of Isaiah to Jesus for him to read to all of his hometown folks. And Jesus is basically going to tell these folks, this is why I've come. This is the purpose for which I exist. This is the mission statement of my life. Let me do a little side note thing here. I encourage you to have a mission statement for your life. Businesses have mission statements. Your school has a mission statement. Many of your organizations like Beta Club or FCA or something like that, they have mission statements. Walmart has a mission statement, right? Everybody has mission statements nowadays. I want to encourage you to think about, what is the mission statement of your life? My life mission statement has 4 components. One of them is I want to be committed, and I want to be faithfully committed to Jesus. My other one is I want to love my wife faithfully. I want to raise my children to love the Lord and follow the Lord. And my 4th one is, I got them out of order. My other one is I want to be successful in ministry and lead other people to love the Lord. Okay, that was actually number 2, and that's why I got them out of order. So look, I encourage you, think about, what is your purpose for existence? At the end of your life, when you're looking back over your life, what things are you going to say, this is an indicator that I was successful? Make that the mission statement of your life, because when you know what you're aiming for, guess what you'll do? You'll work hard to attain it, right? And if you don't know what you're aiming for, guess you'll just pass time. You get what I'm saying? So this, if I could say anything was Jesus' mission statement, it would be this. He says, the Spirit of the Lord is on me, because He's anointed me to preach good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom to the captives, and recovery of sight to the blind, to set free the oppressed, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. Now what does that sound a lot like? Because that is exactly what he was reading. And when he's done reading that, he looks at all the people, and he says, today, this has been fulfilled in your presence. So Jesus is saying, what the prophet Isaiah was prophesying about, that prophecy has come true today in me. This is the reason that I'm here. This is the reason for which I exist. So we can take away three quick things from that. First of all, Jesus came to bring good news, because He has anointed me to preach what? Good news. Okay? Now, that good news, how many of you have ever heard the word gospel? We say you need to share the gospel with somebody, right? We say that's the gospel, okay? Gospel, literally, the Greek word for gospel is literally translated good news. So Jesus says, I have come to preach the gospel, okay? He came also to open eyes. Look at what He says. He sent me to proclaim freedom to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind. Now, of course, we know that Jesus physically opened the eyes of blind people, right? Okay? But guess what other kind of eyes He opened? Not just physical eyes, He opened spiritual eyes as well. Okay? So He was not just getting rid of physical blindness, which he did that for some folks. He was getting rid of spiritual blindness. And Jesus came to rescue the bound and the oppressed. He says to set free the oppressed, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. When you are forgiven of your sin, what are you set free from? You're set free from the bondage of sin. You get what I'm saying? When you get saved, spiritually speaking, before you accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, you are a slave to sin. That means you don't have any other choice but to live a lifestyle that is characterized by sin. Right? Is that true? Okay? When you get saved, when you ask Jesus to come into your heart, He breaks the chains of sin so that sin no longer has control over you. You're no longer a slave to sin, but the Bible says now you become a slave to, anybody know? Righteousness. In other words, you've changed your allegiance. Okay? Jesus came to set people free from slavery to sin. But listen, here's the interesting thing about this. If we liberate people from their slavery to sin, that will also entail liberation from other kinds of slavery as well, and oppression. Isn't slavery evil? Isn't slavery sin? And so our job as believers who follow Jesus is to see that bondage and that oppression on every level, to see people liberated from that. Okay? That's illustrated as we think about our follow-up work from Jesus. Jesus in Luke 4, this is that same passage. He's telling us what His mission statement is. And then Mark chapter 16, 15 through 16 is one of the instances of the Great Commission. Okay, so in Matthew 28, 18 through 20, it's in Acts 1, 8, it's at the end of Luke, and here it is in Mark 16, 15 through 16, and Jesus says to the disciples, go into all the world and preach which is good news. Does that sound similar? He has anointed me to preach good news. He wants us to go into the world and preach good news to the whole creation. Whoever believes and is baptized will be saved, but whoever does not believe will be condemned. So what do we learn from this? Number one, we are to go. And guys, you've got to understand, going is an active pursuit. It's not passive. What is passive? Coming. Right? Let me explain what I'm talking about.
You're not doing it.
When it's the other people are doing action. This would fit a lot of modern day churches if Jesus had said, expect the world to come to you and baptize them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, and teach them all that. Expect the world to come to you. Isn't that what we're doing a lot in our churches? It's like, we're here. If somebody wants to know Jesus, they know where to find us, right? But is that what God told us to do? Is that what Jesus told us to do? No, what did he say do? Go. You go to where they are. Don't expect them to come to where you are. You go get them, as Josh said. Okay? So we're to go. That's an active pursuit. And we're to carry the good news of Jesus everywhere we go. And we are to continue the mission he started. So if the mission of Jesus is to share good news that there is freedom in Christ, then what is our job? To share good news that there is freedom in Christ. And we have a responsibility to do that to everybody, especially those folks who are in bondage. Okay? Now, look at what Isaiah 48, 6-7 says. This is God again talking to Judah. And he's telling them, man, I don't care much about all your religious exercises because they don't mean anything. And here's what he says. Isn't the fast I choose to break the chains of wickedness, to untie the ropes of the yoke, to set the oppressed free, and to tear off every yoke? Is it not to share your bread with the hungry, to bring the poor and homeless into your house, to clothe the naked when you see him, and to not ignore your own flesh and blood? And I think the point that we need to take away from this is that if life truly does matter, then believers are required by the mandate of the Great Commission to not only seek to see people free spiritually, but to see them free physically as well. So we cannot sit idly by on the sidelines while we know that this kind of junk is going on and not get involved in some way to try and help people or to try to stop it. Would y'all agree with me on that? We have a moral imperative to try to do something about it. Imperative, what does that mean? You guys know what an imperative sentence, a must do. Okay? A command. So then how do we respond? Okay? And this goes all the way back to when we were talking about abortion a few weeks ago. The same passage of Scripture that we talked about then applies here when it comes to what do we do about it. Do y'all remember this passage? If you do nothing in a difficult time, your strength is limited. Our point was, if you sit around and do nothing, then collectively we don't accomplish anything, right? But if each of us will do a little something, no matter how little it is, if we can do something, then collectively what? We do a lot, right? Rescue those being taken off to death and save those stumbling towards slaughter. Y'all, for some people, for some, human trafficking, the victims of human trafficking, a lot of times it's worse than death. They're not just being taken off to a final death. They are living in death. You get what I'm saying? If you say, but we didn't know about this, which that's what, up to this point, did we know that this was a big deal? Did we know that human trafficking was a big deal in our city? Did you know that before today? Some of you did, some of you didn't. Okay? But now you know. But if we say we didn't know about this, won't he who weighs the hearts consider it? Won't he who protects your life know? Won't he repay a person according to his work? So in other words, when you stand before God and he says, why didn't you do something about the problem? And you say to him, well, I didn't know anything about the problem. What is he going to say? That's not an excuse, right? We talked about how ignorance is not an excuse. If If you broke a law and you stood before a judge and the judge says, why did you break this law? And you said, I didn't know it was a law. He's not going to say, oh, well, in that case, why didn't you say something? Look, forget all this. Get out of my courtroom. You know, that's not what's going to happen, right? Because the judge doesn't care whether you knew it was a law or not a law. He cares that you broke it. And when it all boils down to it, when we stand before God and offer Him our flimsy excuses for why we didn't get involved in making a difference and getting people set free from things like this, when we didn't get involved by giving to an organization that can save the lives of babies, when we didn't do our part to try to protect the sacredness of life, when we stand before Him, our excuses won't matter. Because what does He know? He knows your heart. He knows the truth, right? So then, we respond to this, then the same way that we responded to the whole abortion issue. And I told you it was ABC. Remember that? A, be an activist. Activist, we said, has gotten a bad rap, but all that means is what? You are active. Don't stay silent. Tell your friends about this issue, right? You learned some things tonight. You don't know that by talking to one of your friends about the fact that this is going on around us, you might not save them from becoming a victim. You guys get what I'm saying? Talk about it. Don't just talk about it. Talk about ways that you can help people. Talk about what to look out for, okay? And when you see something that doesn't look right, tell somebody. Be an activist. Be a backer. What does that mean? It's praying for the situation, praying for those victims that they'll find freedom, but also praying for traffickers that they'll give their heart and lives to Jesus and be transformed so that they'll quit doing this junk. You know what I'm saying? But also support the people who are on the front lines. This was a group of people who's on the front lines, right? And I said, look, this is somebody we can support. So let's find a way to do that. There are organizations that are on the front lines of this human trafficking issue that you can support. You can support them just by making them known. You can support them financially. You can pray for them. Okay? You can tell your parents about them. You can tell other people about them so that other people will support them. And be a champion. Don't be a bystander. Listen, a lot of us have been conditioned to think that we have to mind our own business all the time. Right? We've been told snitches get stitches. Don't tattletale. Don't get involved in stuff that ain't got nothing to do with you. Right? But when we're silent, people suffer. And remember we talked about this when we talked about abortion too. What is silence? Silence is support. When we are silent, we support those who are perpetrating evil. You get what I'm saying? So if you know someone who is being victimized, contact somebody who can help. Most of these places, it's totally anonymous. I know if you call Polaris Project, their hotline, they're going to report it to the law enforcement and they're going to go check it out. Law enforcement never knows that you were involved. Are you following me on this? So you can be totally anonymous. If you see something that just doesn't look right, for instance, you're at Walmart one day and you see like this shady van, all right, with like some people getting out of the van that just don't look like they go together. You know what I'm saying? Maybe it's an older man and he's got like all these young girls with him. You know what I'm saying? That just doesn't look right. You know what I'm saying? There's nothing wrong with kind of watching and being kind of snoop and creep a little bit. And if there's something, spy, that's a good word. And if you continue to see something there that causes you, call the hotline.
I'm gonna go fight that.
Because you just never know. Right? Now, don't go over there and confront the guy. You know what I'm saying? Every one of these folks that are on the front lines tell you, you don't confront, okay? You let the law enforcement do that, but report them to somebody who can check it out. And if they check it out and everything's on the up and up, guess what?
At least you care.
At least you tried and at least you cared, because you never know when it might not be on the up and up. We were traveling to Canada one time for a mission trip. And I had all of our teenagers with me, and we were going through customs, like border patrol, going into Canada. And when you went through there, they made you go individually. So I had to go by myself, and then each of our teenagers had to go by themselves. Well, one of our teenagers was acting all like weird, like real, secretive, and trying to. Anyway, you had to know him. Okay? Well, no, I'm not telling you anything. Anyway, next thing I know, I'm standing over here with all of the youth who have come through, and next thing I know, here comes a border patrol agent, and he makes a beeline to me, right? And he's like, "Are you the one with all these teenagers?" And I'm like, "Yes." And he's like, "Why do you have all of these teenagers outside of their nation of origin?" And I'm like, "Well, we're on a mission trip," so we're like in, this is like in Canada, and anyway, thankfully, I had all my paperwork in order, right? I had parents sign everything that needed to be signed. I had documentation. But I'm telling you, some people would be like, "Oh, I can't believe he did that," and they'd be all mad because he got up in their business. But what did he think? He saw something that looked suspicious and sketchy, so he checked it out, and I was on the up and up, so I had everything in order, and he told us, "Go on and have a good day." Right? So what I'm saying is, if somebody is legit, then they won't have any problems. But if somebody's not legit, you could save a life. You get what I'm saying there? So be a champion. So here's some places. Take out your phones, take pictures. This is some resources for you. If you want more information about human trafficking, then check out these websites. Also, each one of these websites offer ways that you can get involved in the game. If you think something's going on, if you're suspicious that something's going on, that national hotline is a 1-800 number. It's toll-free. It's anonymous. So if you think something's going on, you can call that. Look at this one right here. SamaritansPurse.org. You thought all they did was shoeboxes, right? They don't just do Operation Christmas Child shoeboxes. Samaritan's Purse, listen, Samaritan's Purse is involved all over the world. They do disaster relief. They do the shoeboxes, which is what we get involved with real big around here every year. But they're also involved in setting people free from human trafficking. So go to their website and read about how you can be involved with them. All right? Let me tell you what there is not an option for. Well, you already tell me. What is there not an option for? Just to do nothing. Exactly. So we've got to get involved in this. All right? Questions, comments, thoughts?
Well, you were there at the meeting, the P3 campus thing. They can do that.
Yes, yes. All of the schools here in town. Yeah, I'll do a little shameless plug for that. Okay. It's not really shameless. It's just a plug. There is an app that you can download for your phone called the P3 Campus app. It's free. Okay. And what you do is you'll create like a little user account that only you know about, and then you tell it what state you're in, what city you're in, and then you get to pick what school you go to. And then if you see anything suspicious happen at your school or around your school, Or if you even find out that something suspicious happened at another school, you can back out of your school and go to another school to report it. And if you report that, it's completely anonymous. Nobody knows it's you that reported it. And it goes to the administration of the school, and it goes to like whoever the resource officer is for the school, because most of our schools have resource officers. And then they're able to check it out. You get what I'm saying? So let's say you saw someone bullying someone else. All you gotta do is, was that funny, Josh?
No, sir, everyone's picking on me because I'm homeschooled. That's funny.
If you get bullied at your school, you're in trouble.
Everyone's just doing me.
So if you see somebody bullying someone, you can make an anonymous report. You just tell them what time and who was involved, and then they check it out, and nobody knows that you're the one that tipped anybody off. But look, that's a perfect way for you to be actively involved in doing something rather than standing on the sideline doing nothing. P3 campus, it's not available at Russell Christian Academy. I think it should be,
Yeah.
It
But
really,
it's
really
not.
should be.
okay?
Like, really,
Yeah.
should be.
All right. If there's no other questions, let's pray, and you guys be dismissed. Father God, this really is a serious issue, and it's going on all around us. Lord, I pray that you would show us how to be involved. That, Lord, every day you would bring it to our mind, and we would pray for the victims of human trafficking. Pray for those who even have them in bondage, Lord, that they would have a change of heart. Lord, we pray for those who are on the front line fighting the battle, that you would give them victory and success in seeing people set free. We pray that people would come to know you and find their joy in you and find abundant life in you, God. Help us to be vigilant, to always have our eyes open, to be aware of what's going on around us, not to just live in the moment and kind of ignore the world around us, but help us to always be watching. And Lord, help us to be active in doing what's right and in standing up for truth and justice and for those who can't stand up for themselves, Lord. We pray all this in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Russia really should be.
Come on, man.
Yeah.
Josh is supposed to